Jude also spoke about his Hong Kong experience. A lot of the directors shot for the edit.
Yes.
You know, they literally constructed it in their head as though they were editing.
Yeah.
Did you approach it that way?
I think it was a case, if I may say, of like half and half.
Yeah.
In that there was very much that approach. And again, I've loved Hong Kong films forever, and I know that's how they work. There was obviously the occasional safety angle put in, because if we had two cameras, it was always very sensible. Even though this was going to be the master shot, which would then cut to this shot, it usually made sense to perhaps pop in for a close-up as well and use it to cut with, and it gave us a couple of other options. I definitely prefer to work that way than get lots of coverage, because in the end, it's better not to have too many choices with action. There's definitely an edit in Jude said as he was going, and I thought it'd be very helpful occasionally to get specific other shots that would add, usually things like close-ups, to get particularly on the lead, Brendan, who's playing the character of Ryan, to get some close-up on the hero, if you like. I think that was useful. The only other occasion specifically where we got coverage was on the pyrotechnics, was to have the second camera always, you know, if you've got a wide of a stuntman with squibs, with loads of blood, it's great to obviously pop in there and get them exploding. Expands the detail. Right,
and what format did you shoot on?
It was on Sony Z1s. We usually had one. For the action, we were normally able to get two. And there was one occasion where we used the Panasonic HVX 200. And I have to say, after using that, I kind of wish we'd had them for the rest of the shoot.
Right.
The variable frame rates and so forth.
Right. If you were shooting today, what camera would you shoot on?
I'd want to get, I think it's a D7.
Right.
I really want to get to grip with these stills cameras.
Right. Okay. Canon 7D.
7D. Sorry,
yeah.
7D.
Or the 5D, I guess.
5D. Yeah, exactly.
So, okay, you've not had any experience with them yet.
Not yet. I went to the what's it called? The Broadcast Video Expo.
Yeah.
And they showed a lot of demos of that, and that was just wonderful.
Right.
I know there's the other, use RED.
Yeah.
And I'd like to get to grips with RED, obviously, with the upgraded sensor and everything.
Yeah.
But being able to get in with those, if you like, smaller, perhaps more cameras you can maybe more easily manipulate when you've got the right rigs.
Yeah.
That's something I'm kind of eager to get my hands on, particularly to shoot action.
Right. Okay. So, where did you spend your massive 10 grand budget?
Right, let me get my spreadsheets out.
Broadly, you know.
Okay. In all honesty, most of the money. I mean, there was obviously a chunk spent on pyrotechnics, but we got a lot of bang for our buck. And it would have been terrific if we'd have had a generator on location or power of some description. We could have actually even got even more, because certain things like mortars need to be recharged. So we only got one go per shoot with that. But Mike Knights, our pyrotechnics guy, gave us so much bang for our buck. That was awesome. There was obviously certain amount on things like transport and food, costumes, a little bit on people, but not very much. It was mostly for just getting there, feeding people, which was never enough. I wish we'd have had more money for food, because a fed crew is a much happier crew. It was primarily on the basics, though, and stock, things like that.
So, let's flash forward. You've completed the film, or you're very near to completion. You already have a sales agent on board because of your previous film.
Yeah.
And it suddenly accelerated into sales. Just talk about that process and what happened in post and how it impacted. Yeah,
it was interesting. I mean, our sales agents are called IFM, and they're based in LA and Australia. Well reputable. They've got a huge library, back catalogue of films. It's owned by Tony Janane, who's partly responsible for the big explosion of Ozploitation films. So it's quite an interesting track record there. What was the history behind it was that essentially they liked our first film and subsequently actually took it on from our previous sales agents for that film, without getting too complicated. But that was very nice that they were that interested in pursuing it that they're now selling it. Left 4 Dead, that is. And we were working with them on another project, which was going to be called The Fixers. It was a bit of like a S.H.I.E.L.D. style film. It was a corrupt police, a police actioner, that kind of thing. Unfortunately, that fell through. But of course, we maintained the relationship through into 10 Dead Men, and they gave us script consultancy on it and so forth. And it was great to have a sales agent attached, because obviously that showed people who were involved that it is going to go somewhere, it's going to get sold. It's not one of those things where you finish the film and then think, well, who do we give it to? Who do we show it to? We've already got that outlet, so that's great. And it was a certain amount of security for us to know that. One of what became an issue was that when we got into post, as per usual, these things can take a long time. primarily the sound design. And this isn't really anybody's fault. This is about locking edits, getting them to sound designer, they can start doing it, and so forth. But what we found in the end was that the sales agents, if I can use the right word, demanded that we had the film ready for, it was going to be MIP TV of that year, which meant cutting sort of like 4 weeks out of the audio schedule, because essentially the film had been graded and locked, and that was all sort of in process. But sound design on an action film is incredibly important. I mean, it's important on every film, but just getting the right level of the action, very crunchy sound effects, and filling in lots and lots of detail. And I think looking back at 10 Dead Men in retrospect, there's a lot of scenes that there are lots of little subtle details in there that probably would have been highlighted a lot better should we have had more time to fill that in with sound.
Right.
So as a consequence, as a filmmaker, I feel there are areas that are flat, not due to anyone's fault.
Right. So you were pushed and ended up having to compromise the sound slightly.
I would say probably more than slightly, if I'm honest. It's probably because I'm my own worst critic.
Yeah.
I really genuinely wish we'd had a bit more breathing space.
Right.
It still would have been a race to the finish.
Right.
Always is.